It's the time of year where all manner of bloggers and content creators go in hard on catering their content to that of the spooky variety, Halloween. Beloved holiday of ghouls, ghosts, and scares for obvious reasons has always been closely associated with horror film. So in honor of this great cultural tradition, this week's review will be about the new Shudder original, Scare Me. The film is written by, directed, and stars Josh Ruben. Ruben, a comedian and writer who has written for The Late Late Show with James Corden and Adam Ruins Everything. In addition to starring in a multitude of comedy shorts, Ruben also worked as a commercial director, and he brings that experience to his first feature film, Scare Me. The film centers around Fred, a horror writer and actor working an unfulfilling job making commercials. You can really tell that Ruben has invested himself into this work, can't you? Fred has gone out to the wilderness in the middle of the mountains to isolate himself and hopefully get some writing done. You see, not only does Fred wear the gilded trope of being the unfulfilled creative in the dead-end job, he's also uninspired and talentless. A writer's retreat to the cabin in the woods away from all of life's distractions is just the thing to get the creative juices flowing. Turns out, it ain't. So while Fred is out for a jog, he runs into one of his cabin neighbors, Fanny. After a brief conversation, he discovers she is actually the author behind the award-winning horror novel, Venus. An award-winning author staying right down the road from him. Imagine that. After some failed attempts to try and relate with Fanny from one creative to another, they both retire to their respective cabins for the night. That night, there is a blackout affecting all the cabins in the area. Bored and with a startle, Fanny heads to Fred's cabin and two of them decide to pass the time flexing their writing chops and telling each other ghost stories in an effort to scare each other. I had a lot of fun with this film, and it's very clear that Josh Ruben's had a very distinct vision to create a fun twist on the horror narrative. Scare Me is a film that digs deep into our collective unconscious, the memories we have of late nights with friends telling each other stories about the creepy abandoned neighborhood house or the witch that watches you sleep from the dark corner in your room. You know the one. The film is a minimalist romp anchored on good writing and amazing expressive performances by its cast. It's a horror film, but you won't find a lot of what you may normally consider horror in it. What the film does, though, is reflect to its audience some familiar and pretty topical subtext. There is a substantial tension between the two leads in the film, a tension commonly felt every day in the real world. No, we're not talking about sexual tension. Surprise! Get your filthy minds out of the internet toilet and try to follow the intellectual thought for a change. The tension at play here is that of Fred's fragile masculine inadequacy, besides that of Fanny's success as an independent female. Now, don't allow your unbearable cynicism or perhaps some deep-rooted misogyny to brush aside the subtext that is very inherent in this film. It's actually very on the nose, so much so that the characters themselves give exposition about it towards the end of the film. Very soon after meeting Fanny, Fred begins to nurture a resentment towards her and a degree of success that she's accomplished. He tells her on numerous occasions that she's living his dream. It begins to fuel his anger towards life's circumstances. It doesn't help that Fanny has been sarcastically jabbing at his pride through the course of the evening, though. The night takes a pretty psychotic turn when Fred discovers that Fanny has been taking some unflattering notes on him. All the entitled resentment that has been welling up inside him boils over, and Fred becomes the violent cliche of toxic masculinity. In the end, the reality is that Fred is just another talentless poser who blames his failures on the success of others, and that truth is just too much for his fragile ego to bear. He ultimately suffers a fittingly pathetic demise, contributing to the film's singular body count. Now I've ventured on the interwebs, and I've already heard chatter from some that didn't really like this film. It may not be for everyone, I'll give you that. Horror itself is a very niche genre, and while the film doesn't have the usual monsters, scare, or gore, I feel like you're bound to come away from it with something positive. It's got a fair amount of humor, and as I've mentioned before, the writing and performances are incredibly entertaining. As long as you're not positioning yourself as some hardline horror elitist, I think Scare Me will be a pleasant watch. I've been exposed to a lot of films lately that have really challenged the paradigms and generic conventions that people attribute to horror film. Unlike the film's Fred, when you're creative and inspired, you want to strive towards introducing new ways to approach your work and approach the genre in which you do work. And that's what this film is. It's an incredibly novel way to tell a horror story by quite literally telling us horror stories. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching my thoughts on Scare Me. If you liked the video, please comment, like, obey, subscribe, share, and come back soon where I will have more content in the future. In the meantime, my name is Michael J. Migliore, your man on film.